Good afternoon. I'd like to warmly welcome everyone to this online launch of the Open Doors World Watch List 2021. My name is Teresa Villas. I'm Conservative MP for Chipping Barnet. I'm the parliamentary host today, and I'd like therefore to give a special welcome to all the parliamentarians who have logged in to show their support for the persecuted church around the world. I'd also emphasise that it's a great honour to have Fiona Bruce with us today, the PM's newly appointed faith envoy, for her first official engagement in her very important new role. Welcome, Fiona. I'm sorry we can't meet in person in the House of Commons as we have done in previous years, but I hope we can use this virtual format to connect with even more people than would have been able to make the journey to London for a traditional launch event. I want to start by paying tribute to the work that Henrietta Blythe and the whole team at Open Doors have done in producing this important research and in all the other work of Open Doors over the last 12 months. Sadly, you'll see from the report that millions of Christians around the world still face oppression and violence because of their faith. One of the most devastating findings of this year's report is that the number of Christians killed for their faith is up by 60% compared to last year's reporting period. It's especially worrying that reports of forcible conversion and forced marriage have increased, highlighting the gendered nature of many of the attacks documented in this year's research. High levels of pre-existing deprivation in many Christian communities has meant that the COVID pandemic has hit them hard. In many places, believers have faced discrimination and denial of access to community support schemes. Islamist militants have used COVID restrictions to gain ground in sub-Saharan Africa, exploiting the inability or unwillingness of governments there to protect vulnerable communities. The situation in Nigeria is especially worrying. I've had constituents contact me about this, and what they've told me is entirely consistent with the findings of the World Watch List report. There is little accountability for extremist groups such as Boko Haram and Fulani militants. We'll hear more of that from Amina, who will tell us the tragic story of the attack on her family. But I'm told there is a concerted attempt at Islamization and Fulanization, which is posing a lethal threat to many Christians in Nigeria. It's truly that of 4,700 people documented in this report who've been killed because of their Christian faith. Over 3,500 of these killings happened in Nigeria. Iraq has also risen up the watch list following the return of some Christians to their homes in the Nineveh plains from which they fled in 2014. Father Daniel, who is another of our speakers, will say more about this. Despite the liberation of Mosul and the welcome return of some who were forced out by Daesh, the fear remains that the 2,000-year history of Christianity in Iraq could be brought to an end. Continuing hostility and attacks by Shia militias may ultimately see the country's remaining Christians forced out altogether and unable to return. And our third speaker, Dr. Boyd McMillan, will tell us about the situation in China, where the attempt to Sinicize the church is leading to a level of attempted control and surveillance not seen for many years. But I round off by saying it's not all bad news. Sudan is introducing new constitutional guarantees on freedom of religion. In Sri Lanka, local churches have been delivering emergency supplies during the COVID emergency, even to people who previously attacked them. This is transforming some local relationships for the better. And in China, despite all the adversity, the church continues to grow. It now numbers around 100 million people. This year is the centenary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. And it may also be the year when the Christian church overtakes the Communist Party, meaning that there will be more Christians in China than Communist Party members. And lastly, perhaps most important of all, I draw the attention of all the MPs on the call to page 31 of this year's report, telling us what we can all do to support support the work of Open Doors. So much progress has been made in recent years in getting this on the parliamentary agenda. I'm in no doubt that this activity from MPs and peers played a big part in persuading the government to commission the historic report from the Bishop of Truro. I believe that this is leading to real change, to a more confident and robust defence by our government of the rights of Christians around the world to practice their faith in peace. But the 2021 World Watch List report tells us that there is still so much to do, and I am therefore delighted to hand over to the Open Doors Chief Executive, Henrietta Blythe, to tell us more about that. Over to you, Henrietta.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you for hosting this event again today. It's such a privilege and pleasure to be launching the 2021 World Watch List with you again. Thank you. As you say, it's a real shame that we can't do it in the House of Commons, but one of the advantages of being online is that it enables so many more people to watch. We're delighted to have some 1,000 of our supporters joining us this afternoon, and you're very welcome. We're also delighted that more than 100 MPs committed to join us. And we would encourage you, please, to register in the Google form on the Zoom chat so that we can let your constituents know that you've attended the event. One of the stories that devastated me at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic came from Asia. Christians were unable to go out and work because of lockdown, but they were being turned away from food distribution points. One of our Open Doors partners arrived with a box of rations late one evening at the home of a church leader. When the pastor opened the door and saw the box of rations, he said, "Brother, if you had not arrived tonight, my wife and I had decided to commit suicide because we have nothing." COVID-19 has put new weapons into the hands of people who wish to eradicate and suppress Christianity. In Asia and Africa, we've seen Christians discriminated against in the distribution of food aid. In Nigeria and across sub-Saharan Africa, we've seen Islamic extremists take advantage of lockdown restrictions to dramatically intensify their attacks on Christians. Totalitarian regimes such as China and North Korea have used COVID-19 to legitimize increasing surveillance and control over Christians. And women have been forced to stay at home with the very people who have abused them on account of both their gender and their faith. In Nigeria and across sub-Saharan Africa, lockdown has made Christians sitting ducks for Islamic extremists such as Boko Haram and the Fulani herdsmen. Security forces, including the police, have been busy enforcing lockdowns, and so they've been unable to protect the vulnerable, even if they'd wanted to. Last year, Nigeria was number 12 on the World Watch List. This year, it's at number 9. If violence was the only criteria we used in our research, Nigeria would be number 1. Last year, 3,530 Christians in Nigeria were slaughtered for their faith. On average, that means that 10 Christians in Nigeria are murdered for their faith every single day. Our figures show that those killings peaked during the months of lockdown between April and September. My dear sister Amina will tell us her own story from Nigeria later. Totalitarian regimes have used COVID-19 as a quasi-legitimate excuse to increase surveillance and control of their citizens. North Korea is number 1 on the World Watch list for the 20th year in a row. At the beginning of the pandemic, the government there closed the borders to anyone trying to come in. So we don't actually know what's happened to Christians during COVID-19, although experts suggest that there have been many, many deaths as a result of the virus. Last year in China, we warned that the government was forcing churches to introduce surveillance cameras and facial recognition technology. And if they refused to do so, churches were closed and pastors were at risk of imprisonment. During COVID-19, we've seen Xi Jinping's government tighten these restrictions and controls. China is up 6 places on the list to number 17. It's the first time it's been in the top 20 for some years. My colleague Ron Boyd-Macmillan will unpack the situation there for us shortly. 340 million Christians worldwide, that's 5 times the population of the UK, experienced unprecedented levels of persecution and discrimination as a result of their faith. This year, in the 50 countries on the World Watch list, every single one, for the first time ever, is categorized as either very high or extreme. If we included countries ranking high on the list, that would add another 24 countries. These numbers should devastate us. And every single person's story is absolutely heartbreaking. But there is hope in the darkness. In Sudan, the new constitution guarantees freedom of religion or belief. Sharia law has been removed as the basis of the legal system, and the apostasy law and its associated death penalty has also been scrapped. This is huge encouragement. And while faith in Jesus may increase people's vulnerability, it also gives them huge courage and compassion. We've heard story after story of churches reaching out to bring hope and practical aid to people in their communities in need, whether they're Christian or not. Father Daniel from Iraq will share his story with us later. We're so grateful that so many of you have joined us this afternoon, and we're particularly grateful to the MPs who've joined us. We know that you have more than enough on your plates at the moment, so thank you for sharing this time with us. I'm sure you're here because our supporters, your constituents, have asked you to attend. And you may be wondering, given everything else there is to do, why should you worry about persecuted Christians? Well, here's why. When people are truly following Jesus, they are a huge force for good in their communities and in their countries. If Christianity was completely eradicated or suppressed in the countries of the World Watch List, those countries would be much the worse for it, and the world would be a much more dangerous place. The human right to freedom of religion or belief matters, not just for Christians and for other people of faith, but for society as a whole. There are 3 things you can do to strengthen the church and to help to protect Christians who are at risk of persecution. Number 1, when it comes to international aid, please ensure that the additional vulnerabilities of religious minorities, including Christians, is fully considered. Number 2, please partner with church leaders and other local faith actors, both to diagnose problems and to implement solutions. Such a valuable resource must not be ignored. And 3, when it comes to future trade talks, please ensure that discussions around human rights place freedom of religion or belief front and centre, particularly with the countries on this year's World Watch List. Thank you so much for attending this event this afternoon. Each and every one of you is a huge encouragement to all of us at Open Doors and to all those we serve. Thank you. There's going to be an opportunity at the end of this session for MPs to ask questions, and Teresa and Fiona and I will have a go at answering them. Please do post your questions into the Zoom chat and my colleagues will pick them up. And now we're going to hear from my brothers and sisters around Nigeria, Iraq, and China.
My story goes like this. It was 2nd October 2012. Boko Haram sects entered my family. They were not attacking everyone, but they attack Christian family. Sometimes they attack churches, just that they want that particular state to become a Muslim state. They entered my house. They tied my husband and 3 of my children. They brought them out, and I was there in front of them. They asked them to denounce Christ, and they refused. So they went ahead and slaughtered them. My husband gave up the ghost at that time. Even when they were slaughtering him, I was hearing my husband praying to God, because he knew whether they are going to kill him or not. He know that he's not going to denounce Christ. That's what my children did too. They refused to denounce Christ. That is why they slaughtered them, because they are Christians. And then my husband died, and 2 of my kids were taken to the hospital. They survived after surgery by His grace. Another incident happened on June 20th June 2017. I was about going to Lhasa. Boko Haram State again kidnapped us. We were 16 inside the police van, and then they opened fire on us. They killed 5 men that were with us in the bus, and then took 11 of us women to Sambisa Forest. We were there for 8 months, having trauma, hunger, fear, so many things. So from there, when we entered Sambisa Forest, one of us died after two days, because some of us have bullet injuries, in which I was included, and she lost so much blood, she died after 2 days there. All of us were Christians. They used to come, they used to send their imam to come and preach to us after 3 or 4 days like that, to come and preach to us, so that maybe we will be convinced and then become Muslims. But we will say, to die is gain for us. We cannot denounce Christ. And thank God, all of us were ready, either it is date or release. And we say no. First, they say that if we are not Muslims, they cannot marry us. We say, fine. And then they say that if we don't want to marry, we can stay like that. But if we did not become a Muslim, they are going to make us a slave of theirs there inside Sambisa. And this happened because we were all Christians. That's the persecution there. Violence is still increasing in Nigeria, and is most especially in northern Nigeria. The Christians are still suffering because the attacks are still happening every day in Nigeria, most especially those that are far north. The killing are still increasing. The solution has not made, because Boko Haram are still attacking some villages in our communities there, and then Fulani herdsmen are still attacking our people in their farms. And if you look at it, most of the attacks are happening on Christians there. And in the news, you'll be hearing a different story from what is happening in northern states, Nigeria. So it's still increasing. The churches are trying by making, maybe giving programs to some Christians, at least to encourage them. Yes, COVID-19 was so difficult to me, most especially because at that period, it was so hard and horrible, because we were living in fear, and we were living in hunger. Open Doors helped me during that COVID-19 period. They came to my aid and helped me. So they supported me really financially. And then I used some of the money at least to complete my last year's rent with it. So I was very happy for Open Doors.
I'm not just saying this just because I feel so. I'm saying this because I've seen it. I was privileged to see some of the documents for the sharing, the amount of bag of rice sent to a local government that is more Muslim dominated, and the amount of the bag of rice sent to a local government that is more Christian dominated. The local government that is more Muslim dominated gets to have more bags of rice, more cartons of noodles, and more other things than the Christian dominated areas. The highest most people have gotten so far is about 2 sachets of noodles and like a bowl of rice and then a cup of oil. That is what we've seen being shared in majorly Christian dominated areas. And we've seen how these foods are being shared, and it's mad, it's rowdy. It's not done orderly. In some of the sharings, we've had Christians faint and collapse in the struggles of trying to get food for their family. It is not just a marginalization, this is a persecution for Christians. It is assumed that the Christians can take care of themselves, but this is not the truth. Majority of us who are even Christian, including myself speaking, had to help some other people, not because we have, but we had to share from the little that we have. And we're praying to God that anyone who hears this and listens to this could feel the pain in our hearts, in my heart to be particular, and pray with us and also do something about this. Thank you.
Hello, my friend. This is Father Daniel from Iraq, and today I'm going to share with you the situation of the Iraqi Christians and their challenges and where are they going today. First of all, the year of 2020 was a dramatic year for all the Iraqis, but I say it especially for the Christians because there is something linked to their history and it's linked and it touched their life until today, which is the hope they have to stay in this Iraq and to rebuild this country. First of all, I would like to go back a little bit to my story. And when I was 7 years old, when I started to go to school, uh, it was very difficult for me to cope with the new environment that I was going through at the school. I didn't know any friends. I didn't have any friends by that time. So I met up with my friend Muhammad, and we were playing together on the first day, and we were getting along with each other. And we decided that on the next day, when he's going to school, he will pass by my flat, and then I will go down, and then we can walk together to the school. On the next day, I was waiting for my friend Muhammad, the balcony, and he was passing by my home, and I started to shout at him to wait for me while I'll go down the stairs, but he was not stopping by, and he was not hearing my voice. And then I went down very quickly, and I stopped him, and I started asking him why you were not stopping, and he said that my parents say that I'm not allowed to mix and to talk with any infidels. And that was I was very devastating by that time because he was the first friend that I made in the school, and I start to have many questions like why I'm suffering, why I'm not having any friends. Was it due to my belief or to my faith? But I was very little at that time, and I couldn't analyze what I'm going through. But unfortunately, after 2003, when Saddam Hussein was taken out of the authority, the Christians became a target for the extreme groups, and the radical groups start to threat the Christians and taking control of their properties, their houses, and everything that they have. So my family was one of these families who got the killing threat by Al Qaeda 2006. We received the killing threat on my 16th birthday. And it was very difficult for my family. It was very difficult to leave all of our neighbors, all of our relatives, our church, my school, and everything. It was very difficult to leave everything behind in just like few hours. So I remember I was crying all the day. We didn't know where to go, but finally we decided to go to Erbil because it's a safe place for the Christians because of the coexistence is in Erbil. And then I remember I was crying all the way in the car. So instead of getting any gifts on my 16th birthday, I was crying all the way looking for a safe place where I can live with my family. So in 2012, I became a priest. And then 2014, when Al Qaeda invaded all the Christian cities and villages in Nineveh Plain, more than 120,000 people were forcibly displaced by ISIS. So my church became a shelter for more than 1,600 people, including 365 children. So that's why we decided to open hope centers in Erbil and in all the cities where the Christians were displaced. And these centers, they played a very big role in restoring their faith and restoring their hope that they can still play their role as children of God in this country and rebuild this country, and they can become example of peace and love in this country. So we continue to working with the different groups, and then after 2016, ISIS were defeated by Iraqi troops, and Mosul was liberated. And most of the Christians, they decided just to go back and see what happened to their cities. So they discovered that their cities and their churches, their schools, their hospitals were fully burned and destroyed by ISIS. So that was the second trauma that our people got after ISIS invaded their cities. And most of them, they thought that their life has been ended. They can't stay and live in this country. So that's why the church started a process. It's called the process of reconstruction or the process of rebuilding. And the church was able to rebuild about until 2020, the beginning of 2020, maybe to 55 to 60% of the all of these burnt houses and churches. While in 2020, because of coronavirus or COVID-19, the church was unable to continue this process, and that's why until today, many Christians, they still doesn't have houses to live, to go back and to live in them. So we were able, with the hope centers that we opened during the times of displacement, after displacement, to serve these people in a better way, to respond to their basic needs, and also to respond to their needs and spiritual needs, psychological needs, and emotional needs. And we were able also to uh, transfer most of the patients which were unable to go to the hospital. We did that with our staff and members that we have serving in our teams. If we're going to have a look at the life of the Iraqi Christians that have been through since 2003 and until now, their numbers is diminishing day after day, and our numbers had been falling since 2003. Let's say from 1.5 million until today is about maybe 125,000 Christians. And when we are talking about the Iraqi Christians, we are talking about one of the most ancient sects which still exists in Iraq. We are the native people of this country. Many of people, they are thinking that our country is vomiting us. Our country doesn't want us to stay here anymore. But we are still on restoring this faith. So today our existence is being threatened, and maybe after a few years, we are going to be maybe only a few pieces put in a museum. So today we are asking for your help, because we say that maybe we will forget about the people who persecuted us, but we will not forget about the people who stood with us and who helped us during these difficult times. Today, we are living a very critical point. So the future of us, or the remaining of the Iraqi Christian, is based on your actions. Whether you are going to give us a chance, and whether you are giving the Christianity a chance to rebirth again, or whether it's going to be perish, and we will be only a matter of study for the historians and also for the politicians.
country that contains the world's largest persecuted church of nearly 100 million has returned to the top 20 of the World Watch list at number 17 for the first time in many years. And this is due to the policies of the urbane Chinese President Xi Jinping. He became president in 2013. He expects to remain in charge for 15 more years. What drives his intrusive and stifling supervision of churches may be the sheer size and growth of the Chinese churches. There was a 2015 book called A Star in the East, and it showed that if the Chinese church grows at an annual rate of 7%, which it already has since 1980, then the Chinese church will number 300 million, nearly, by 2030 and nearly 600 million by 2040. That very much concerns the Chinese leadership, because it would force the government to share power with the church, and so it is taking steps to prevent such an eventuality. So under President Xi, three big shifts have taken place which form a kind of pincer movement on the church. The first is organizational, that the overall supervision of religious affairs has been moved to a much more senior and powerful party organization called the United Front Work Department, and their representatives are taking tea, as it's called, with pastors, laying down the law, telling them what they can and cannot do. Never before have pastors met so many senior members of the policy-making tier of government as now. The second is ideological. The Chinese Communist Party is a lot more communist again. Xi Jinping thought is mandated, and it's a reversion to a kind of 1950s Marxism. Pastors are expected to be, quote, country-loving people and, quote, promote socialist values. And these are powerful phrases because they require the government to be praised or else. A pastor said recently, every time I preach now, I am expected to praise the government rather than Jesus, and I don't like it. And then finally, there is the technological squeeze. The individual is under surveillance like never before. And the supervision is so sophisticated, so complete, it's no longer really possible to talk of an underground church at all. And there is a fear that this data that is inevitably harvested will turn into a negative social credit rating for Christians. Now, China's official Protestant church, the Three Self-Patriotic Movement, has had it very hard. They have to install CCTV cameras in every church. Parents have been told in no uncertain terms that they cannot take their children to church, and the children are turned back at the door if that happens. Thousands of churches have been closed and dozens of pastors arrested. The house churches themselves have been splitting up the size of their gatherings in anticipation of further pressure, and hardest hit are those Christians from a Tibetan or a Muslim background. They not only face restrictions from the government, but from their own families and communities as well. In short, if you want to go to church, you have to accept that you have a job in this country because they're reserved for members of the Communist Party. You had better leave your children at home, and you dare not, even if you could, download a Bible. And at every gathering, no matter how private, you must take care to assure listening government ears that you are reliable, loyal, and essentially that you will keep your faith to yourself. Churches that have links to the wider body of Christ internationally, or have extensive networks around the various provinces of China, or welcome members particularly from the Uyghur community, are specially targeted. But it's not always bad news. Pastors talk of having a new audience for the gospel, which has the top officials that are listening in. The house churches, ironically, are back in the home and experiencing a greater intensity of fellowship Church building projects are abandoned. Digital evangelism is on the rise, as there are some that can defy the government firewalls. And the Chinese church reached out globally for help in this year of COVID like never before. Next year is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. It will also be the year when Christians finally outnumber party members. And that will, paradoxically, bring more persecution and more joy.
Well, I certainly found it both moving and really informative to hear that testimony from our guest speakers. It is always sort of a really sort of astonishing and powerful to hear the incredible bravery of so many Christians around the world in the face of the persecution they're suffering. And now it is my great pleasure to be able to hand over to another of our very distinguished guest speakers today, Fiona Bruce. It is very welcome that Fiona has been appointed as the Prime Minister's envoy on freedom of religion or belief. She has a long and established track record of campaigning for protection of human rights around the world, but particularly for freedom of religion. And her commitment to the persecuted church around the world is absolutely second to none. And I know that she's been involved with these events and supported them over many years. And her predecessor, Raymond Chishti, did wonderful work. And I know that Fiona is going to be able to continue that excellent work in taking forward, in particular, the conclusions of the report of the Bishop of Truro. So, Fiona, we're really looking forward to what you have to say. We're so grateful to you for joining us so early in the period of this new appointment for you. And I'm very happy to pass over to you to speak to the gathering.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And as the Prime Minister's new special envoy for freedom of religion or belief, and also as a Member of Parliament who has engaged with Open Doors for many years, it's my privilege to speak here at this event and for an Open Doors event to be my first public engagement in this role. I'm delighted about that. And I'm delighted to give a very warm welcome to the 2021 World Watch List report. Thank you for producing it, Open Doors. It is such an important document to an increasing number of parliamentarians. As a Christian myself, I understand the comfort and strength that faith brings, and so I believe passionately that the freedom to choose and practice your religion, whatever your faith, or indeed to have no religion at all, should be enjoyed by everyone, everywhere, and that no one should be discriminated against or persecuted because of it. But what has really encouraged me is how over recent years an increasing number of MPs have begun to share the concerns that Teresa and I know Open Doors have about this. Increasingly, members of Parliament are asking questions in the House of Commons. They're calling debates about particular countries where persecution is a concern. They're pressing government ministers to take action to challenge this. And in terms of this increased awareness and understanding of the importance of freedom of religion or belief, the annual World Watch List is increasingly important. It's a respected document. it's frequently referred to by members of Parliament in the House of Commons, and that's because we consider the information in it to be so well resourced and reliable, coming so often as it does directly from people in countries of concern. And that brings me to my second thank you of today, and that's to the Open Doors staff and their partners and the faith actors on the ground in those countries who do so much to ensure that that reliable information is brought forward to us as members of Parliament. Thank you too for the work that you do to help people on the ground who are discriminated against and persecuted because of their faith. Work which I know is often in very difficult, challenging and personal risky situations. You help people who are suffering because they don't have that freedom to share and live by their beliefs that we believe is so important. And of course, when you don't have that freedom, so many other freedoms can be lost too. A job, a home, family life, security, even your own liberty and life itself. So thank you for all that you do in all of those countries around the world, so many of them listed in the 50 countries in the World Watch List released today. People like Father Daniel, who we heard about in the film. And I have noted how in the 2021 report, Open Doors is calling on our government to note a number of things, to note and recognise the value of working more through local faith actors in those countries, and that government should look to make that more possible. I will feed this back to government. I'll feed back to the fact that in aid distribution, the additional vulnerabilities of people, particularly during the COVID pandemic, need to be taken into account. And thirdly, that human rights are considered in trade negotiations. And my third thank you today is to thank all the Open Doors supporters in our constituencies all around the country. It's quite remarkable to hear that there are over 1,000 people who've joined today's meeting online. And I just want to thank you, because when we as members of Parliament hear from you, such as receiving the letters and cards like these that I received from my constituents about today's event, MPs really do take notice. You have helped ensure that increased awareness on the part of so many MPs of freedom of religion or belief as a concern. You've helped ensure that over 100 members of Parliament or their representatives have joined today's event. That's a huge number for a single parliamentary event. In fact, I can't remember one where there have been that many in my 10 years in Parliament. As a result of this report, many MPs will be using the 2021 World Lich throughout the coming year, as well as contacting Open Doors for more detailed information about countries of concern, as I did just a few weeks ago to help me present in a debate on the increased impact of COVID on those already discriminated against for their faith. A key part of my new role is to ensure that the Prime Minister is aware of such concerns, and to work with the Foreign Secretary and Lord Ahmed, the Minister for Human Rights. They raise issues of concern with their counterparts in other countries on a regular basis. But I recognise too that just as Open Doors has real impact because so many of you work as a team in this country and abroad, my role will only make a difference if I work too with others. My role will only make a difference if I work cross-party with other members of Parliament here in the House of Commons. It will only make a difference if I work with faith leaders, with civil society and with organisations like Open Doors. It will make a difference if I can work with my international counterparts from other countries, and it may encourage you to know that just this afternoon I have recently been in a virtual meeting with representatives from 32 other countries where there are envoy roles appointed similar to myself. It's enormously encouraging to me to see how concerns about freedom of religion or belief are growing around the world. And one of my priorities is to ensure that the UK contributes to its international lead, its growing international lead on this issue. And as Teresa has said, another of my priorities is to oversee the full implementation of the Bishop of Truro's recommendations in his review on how our Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which is now called our Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, can support persecuted Christians around the world. But as the 2021 World Watch List report says, Christians will only be free from persecution when freedom of religion or belief is guaranteed for all. Societies which aim to protect and promote freedom of religion or belief are far more likely to be stable, prosperous, and resilient against violent extremism. But where societies exclude freedom of religion or belief for some, for example, for some faiths or minority groups, everyone suffers. Preventing that suffering, which is affecting millions across the globe, as we've heard from Henrietta today, is why the work of Open Doors is so vital. And so in closing, can I say for me that the envoy role, whilst it is a privilege, will most importantly for me be about making a difference in the daily lives of people like Amina, who we heard of today in the film. That will be the measure of whether over time my envoy work is worthwhile. I want to put on record my heartfelt compassion and respect for all those who make a stand and suffer often acutely for their beliefs. For me, at the heart of freedom of religion or belief has to be respecting the unique worth of every human being. It's about the importance of treating every individual with dignity. It's about saying, you matter, you have purpose, you are significant. Wherever you are in the world, whatever your faith or none, you are not forgotten, you are not disregarded, you are not overlooked.
Thank you so much, Fiona. We are absolutely delighted that a new special envoy has been appointed, and we're absolutely delighted that it's you. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, we have an opportunity for a little bit of Q&A, and Teresa and Fiona and I are forming the panel. I've got a couple of questions here to kick off with. I understand there are now 2,300 people on YouTube, and the Zoom link is overflowing with MPs. If you're an MP who's had to join us on YouTube, please do email advocacy@opendoorsus.org just to register your name, so we can let our supporters, who are your constituents, know that you've attended. Now, Teresa, my start of 10 is we've obviously heard about China coming back at number 17 and being in the top 20 for the first time in a couple of decades. As Ron said, it's clear that the Chinese Communist Party are trying to control and repress religion. How can this accelerating persecution be halted? And what steps do you think the UK government can take to help with this?
Well, the relationship of Western democracies like the United Kingdom with China is one of the most difficult geopolitical questions that we face at the moment. I mean, the reality is obviously, we have, very little power. All we have is exhortation of the Chinese authorities to treat their minorities with the respect and dignity that they deserve, and which Fiona so movingly rounded off her presentation with. I think it does have to be a core part of our foreign policy and the Foreign Secretary was emphasizing that in the context of the horrors being inflicted on the Uyghur Muslims. Only recently the Foreign Secretary has been emphasizing this, but it does have to be a key part of our relationship with China to continue to make the case for civilized treatment of their different faith communities and their religious minorities. And I'm very conscious of the point that you at Open Doors always make, that freedom of religion is always such an important bellwether for other human rights. If one sees clampdowns and crackdowns on people exercising their Christian faith, so often that is symptomatic of wider oppression. So I'm afraid I wish I did have the answer, but one thing we can do is make sure that our government raises at every opportunity the importance of allowing Christians, Muslims, and other religious minorities to practice their faith in peace in China.
Thank you so much. Now, I've got another question that's just come through on the WhatsApp. Fiona, maybe I can put this to you. As the UK prepares to host the International 2022 Ministerial to advance religious freedom, what can or should our government be doing now?
Well, thank you very much, Henrietta. Yes, indeed. I think one of the things that we can do is continue to encourage countries right around the world to join with the 32 countries that I have mentioned this afternoon, having had a connection with. It's really important that the more that we can join together to raise concerns about issues where freedom of religion or belief is denied, the greater the voice will be for the voiceless. So that is a really critical priority that we need to focus on, as well as raising this as a concern with our individual nations, for example, through education, helping people understand how important this issue is. We've done so much to encourage people to understand the importance of climate change, and it's not in any way to deny that. But Henrietta, you today have told us of the hundreds of millions of Christians, let alone people of other faiths, who are affected in very real ways by persecution, by being prevented from exercising their faith. And the more we can raise awareness of this in our own countries and right around the world, the better. And so I think for us to be hosting this ministerial, where people will come to the country from all over the world, and to inspire and encourage them to raise this up the agenda, will be a real privilege. And I'm very much looking forward to us hosting that conference.
Great, thank you so much. Now, we're a bit short of time, but I do want to ask you both, if I may, one final question which has come through, which is around the trade question. So as we've said, we're very keen. We know that Dominic Raab has said he wants to see human rights as a core part of the trade negotiations. And a question's come through about a lot of MPs are trade envoys to individual countries. Do you know whether questions about Christian and religious persecution are part of their standard questions in trade discussions? And has this already been discussed? Has this already been discussed before?
Fiona, do you want to go ahead? I just, as far as I'm not aware as to whether the trade envoys have this as a specific question that they ask, but I do know that in trade negotiations, human rights matters are very much on the table. But I think it would be a very good idea if all our individual trade envoys had this aspect to the matters that they raise with the countries they're working with. Obviously, thankfully, there will be many countries which have exemplary records on freedom of religion or belief and don't really need to engage too much in a dialogue. But there may be other countries with whom we're doing business where it would be, I think, very helpful. It's a great suggestion to ask all our trade envoys to raise the plight of Christians with the countries they're engaging with.
Yes, I absolutely agree. The UK actually has a strong history of safeguarding human rights and promoting our values globally. This was brought out earlier this week in a debate in the House of Commons titled Global Britain. And where we have strong trading relationships, strong economic relationships with other countries, then that should allow us to open up discussions with those countries on a range of difficult issues, including human rights. And I think it's absolutely right that our trade envoys and our ministers do all that they can to encourage countries we trade with to uphold the same international human rights and obligations, including freedom of religion or belief, that we now know in this country are so important.
Brilliant. Thank you both so much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So thank you both. And Teresa, I'm going to hand over to you now to conclude.
I would like to echo your thanks, Henrietta, to everyone who is watching. It's fantastic that we've got this huge audience. A big thank you to all my parliamentary colleagues. A big thank you to Fiona for a wonderful presentation. We all wish her well in her new role. And I would round off by encouraging all my colleagues to continue to support the work of Open Doors and to raise these matters in Parliament, to do all we can to give hope to Christians who are suffering as a result of their faith around the world. Thank you, Henrietta, for this wonderful research that's been done. It will have a huge impact in Parliament over the next 12 months as we highlight these very important issues.